Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to Open Your Eyes to the Universe. I'm Gabrielle Martin and it's a pleasure to have you with us again for another episode. If you're joining for the first time, a very warm welcome, and if you're checking in every month, welcome back. It's great to have you with us and thanks for coming along. Now, for those of you who don't know, Open Your Eyes to the Universe is a series of contemporary talks, discussions, conversations, open-eyed meditations and interviews with people who inspire and uplift others by sharing their wisdom, their insights and their experiences. Now viewers, as always, we welcome your participation and questions. Thanks to those of you who've sent them in already. And if you'd like to ask a question as we move along, please write it in the chat box and we'll address your question in the Q&A. Last month on Youniverse, we were in the company of and had a conversation with Dr. Raksha Balbadur, a palliative care physician based in South Africa. She was discussing a new approach to stress management, that being love versus force. Tonight we're taking up the topic Deciphering Truth, and we're in the company of mathematician Dr. Grace Lopez Charles. I think we're used to associating a word like decipher with a word like code or formula, like as in deciphering a code or a formula. And I imagine Grace, as a mathematician, has spent a lot of her career teaching students how to understand and decipher codes and formulas. And here we are in 2021, needing to decode the truth. It's kind of unfortunate, isn't it, that today we need to decipher truth, that truth isn't always so dazzlingly clear and obvious to us. So we're in for an evening where each one of us can personally explore who deceives us and how easily are we deceived. These are pertinent questions to ask ourselves as we navigate the unseen in our everyday living. Sometimes there's an exceptionally fine line between truth and falsehood. So how do we know when someone is not being sincere? A friend of mine recently referred to a piece of research that identified that people believe 55% of what someone says on the basis of their body language, 38% on the tone of their voice, and only 7% on the basis of their actual words. So there's a lot going on in the realm of the unspoken. And more than ever, each one of us needs the power of discernment. Our guest speaker, Dr. Grace Lopez Charles, is a doctor of mathematics, and she spent about 30 years in the field of education as a teacher and a lecturer in mathematics, with over 3 years experience in researching and teaching in the learning of mathematics. She's also been actively involved in educator training and values education, training educators, working with children and young adults in and out of the classroom. For the past 23 years, Grace has been a student and teacher of Raj Yoga, as taught by the Brahma Kumaris. She lived in Cambridge, UK until 2008, when she was asked to assist in the activities of the Brahma Kumaris in Guyana, West Africa. And Grace now divides her time between these two places. So Grace, deciphering truth, it's a fantastic topic. And also this aspect of tapping into the inner power of discernment. We're looking forward to listening to you. Our viewers are from many parts of the world, but predominantly from New Zealand and Australia. And that's a region we locals often refer to as Down Under. So Grace, a very, very warm welcome to Down Under.
Good evening, everyone. And I must say thank you to Gabrielle for that warm welcome and that lovely, generous introduction. It is a pleasure to be with you all here this evening. And it's never been in my thoughts, not even in my wildest dreams, to visit Australia. Let's just say it has never been on my travel radar. And that is because I thought it was so very far away. But in the past few months, this is my second virtual visit to Australia. So there might be something there, a tiny little seed of desire that I'm not fully aware of. And what is great is, as Gabrielle says, I have the opportunity to share with you my thoughts on deciphering truths. And as we heard already, that there is a very fine line between truth and falsehood. So how do we know when someone is not being sincere? How do you know? How can you tell? Every day we are bombarded by a profusion of information, courtesy the print media, the tabloids, the television, and last but not least, in fact, the most significant of them all, is this plethora of social media platforms. And so we are saturated with so many opinions and theories and different topics that how do we know which voices are speaking words of truth? In this information laden world that we live in, it is easy to mistake a illusion for reality. It is so easy to be blinded by all that glitter. We have become so addicted to other people's stories. We love the juicy gossips. We want to know their lifestyle. We want to know their fears and accomplishments, their successes and failures. We just want to know their story. And remind you, these are people that we don't even know. They are people that we might never encounter in our lifetime. Yet still we are so entrenched in their lifestyles. And really, what we need to focus on mostly, we have neglected. We have neglected to listen to ourselves. We have neglected to listen to our own heart. And so right now, for the next few moments, let us take this opportunity to do just that, to listen to the heart. So sit comfortably wherever you are and just allow the body to calm down and feel the mind slipping into a lovely calmness. Leave aside all the roles that you play, your history, your cares and concerns. Imagine them as layers of t-shirts that you can easily remove completely as you enter a space of simple solitude, a space of silence. Allow this silence to clear the mind and to take you into a serene space, a space of peace, a peaceful space. In this peaceful space, you are so relaxed. Your mind is so calm. And now ask yourself, who deceives me? And how easily am I deceived? Who deceives me? And how easily am I deceived? Do not try to design the answer. Just stay in this peaceful space and listen for the answer. It will come. Perhaps as a word or phrase or even an experience. Accept any visual that might emerge. You are listening to the soul's response. your intellect, your conscience. This is the true heart. You are listening to your true heart. This heart is very different from the physical heart. It is a heart that not only feels, but understands, knows, and experiences. What is your heart telling you right now? We hear what we are, only what we are listening for. But when we clear the mind of the jungle of voices, we are able to hear the truth that lies deep inside ourselves. Let us now return our attention to this moment, to the present, but with the realization and the knowledge that when I listen to my heart, I am giving myself the opportunity to decipher truth. Just take a nice deep breath and let it out slowly and gently, and become present. Thank you. Now, at heart, I am a researcher, and like every research project that I've been on, there is always that need to define the key terms of the topic. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm definitely not going to do that this evening, partly because it is time consuming, and partly because a topic like truth has so many branches and so many opinions and so many facets that it will take us a lifetime to discuss and yet still not come to any consensus. So let's not ask what truth is, but instead let's ask, how can I recognize truth reliably when it appears? And you might say to me, but Grace, how can I recognize truth if I don't know what it is? And I will say to you, of course you can. And how I'm going to handle this topic is in two ways. I'm going to start by giving you the scientific approach to truth. And then I'm going to give you the spiritual approach to truth. And this will explain how you can actually recognize truth without having to know what it is. Because within me, there's a touchstone for truth that will always know. So every research, every theory, every topic that we can look at on a more scientific way, there are 4 factors that determine truthfulness of that theory. They are congruence, consistency, coherence, and usefulness. Now I'm going to touch on each of these individually, and I will take you into the essence of it. We can't go too very deep. Time does not allow for that, but I promise that you will get an understanding of it as fully as can be. So let's take consensus. What am I saying? So let's take the first one, which is congruence. Now, congruence is really sameness, equality. When I say that a theory is true, it means that it is congruent to what I already know. It's congruent. It fits the facts. It is a perfect fit. In geometry, and by the way, this is the only math example I'm taking. I promise you, I'm not going to geek it out with a lot of math things. This is the only one because congruence actually is a very mathematical concept. And so in geometry, two figures or two objects are said to be congruent when they have the same size and the same shape. Or one has the same size and the same shape as the mirror image of the other. Right now, look at your hands, and you will see that they have the same size and the same shape, unless anything has been surgically removed or there might be some addition on some. It will be the same size and the same shape, but they are mirror images of each other. The same with your feet and the same with your shoes. Your shoes are the same size unless you're wearing a size 2 on your left foot and a size 5 on your right foot, then it's not the same. And then that's not true. It's not a way that we work. So the shoes are the same size and the same shape, but they're mirror image of each other. So congruency, everything maps onto each other, so it is true because we can see that physically it is exactly the same. All we have to do is to flip it in case of the mirror image and we'll get it exactly the same as the other. The other thing is consistency. And consistency means that there is no doubt in the mind. When I say that a theory is true, it means it's consistent with all the knowledge that I have of it. So I call it an elegant fit. And why? Because some things remain the same, but some things change. It's not a perfect fit like incongruency, but it is more elegant. And the example I'll have for that is, I know that any liquid will take the shape of whatever container it is. That's a fact. That's the knowledge I have. And so let's say I have a liter bottle of water. And I think this bottle is the best bottle to store this freshly made lemonade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour the liter of water out of the bottle and I put it into a bowl. Now the bowl is shallow and it has a wider circumference, much wider circumference than the bottle, but the water takes the shape of that bowl, but the volume remains roughly 1 liter. And let's say I have this urge and I want to make a cake. And so I need the bowl for the batter. I pour the water out of the bowl into a jug. The jug is not as shallow as the bowl, and it does have a wide circumference, but not as wide as the bowl, but much wider than the bottle. And so again, the water takes the shape of the jug, but the volume is roughly 1 liter. And I'm saying roughly 1 liter because scientifically, some drops might remain in each container as you move it, but they are nano margin of error. So it doesn't really matter, but we can't say it's fully 1 liter. And so consistency means that some things are known facts and the changes in terms of the shape changes, but the volume doesn't change. So that's quite elegant. But when it comes to coherence on the other hand is where there are no loopholes. I can say that a theory is true when it is coherent with everything I already know. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and every piece has its place because I know what the picture is going to look at. So I know this piece belongs to the sky, and this piece probably belongs to the boat in the water, and this one maybe the grassy verge, and this one probably to the trees in the background. And so it all fits together. Now, in law, in a case, a lawyer will fight his case citing a lot of statutes and a lot of different cases where similar things came up, and to create a tight case that is free from loopholes so that the opposing lawyer doesn't get the opportunity to challenge him and to go ahead and get either the verdict of whatever it is he wants, either guilty or not guilty if he's the defendant, and guilty if he's the prosecutor. Journalists try to do this, and maybe in the olden days when journalism had a little bit of integrity, but these days it's more sensational. But journalists tries to give the reader the feeling that whatever they're reading is true. And how they do this is by a structured approach where there is a blending, or we could say a transition of ideas and sentences and statements that's so molded that it feels believable, it feels credible. And so there is no room for error in that. It's stage by stage in a way that everything fits so nicely together that you cannot have any doubts about it, or you cannot mistake it for anything false. But the final thing is usefulness. And usefulness, something is useful when it is true. Anything that is true is useful. And that gives me a sense of mastery. And so in this mastery, if I am working with something that is true, then my action will also bring that successful result because it's true. And what I am doing, I am creating a structure based on something that is definitely true. And how do we know it's definitely true? Maybe because it's passed through the rigor of congruency and consistency and coherence. And so now usefulness actually determines that it is applicable to new and different situations. That makes it useful. When I was doing my own research and my PhD, I had a PhD supervisor who was doing research in Brazil. And she did research on street children and children in school of the same age group. The street children were given computations, exactly the same computations as those in the school. And they were able to work it out in their head very easily, but they could not tell you an algorithm for working it. They could not relate it, they could not teach it to someone else. Those in the school took a little bit longer to work it and found a little bit difficulty in working it out mentally, but they were able to explain the algorithms. So what we have here is usefulness into street knowledge and usefulness into book sense, or what we are taught in school by rules and regulations, and in maths axioms and theorems. And really, when we apply those into new situation, we are making it more truthful. And this is why there's that feeling that math is the truest language we have. Some might not agree with me because they might have found mathematics very difficult. but believe me, it is the truth of everything. And if you just sit down without the judgment of its difficulty, you will realize that yourself. And so what I'm saying that usefulness only comes when the other three factors are in place. And we see that when we're working on a research project, that we use what we call triangulation of strategies. So we use three different strategies with the same data sample, and we come up with a true picture. If they do not match, the picture is not true, and we have to back to the drawing board with a new research question and looking at a new research method design. So what I've just given you is a picture of a very clinical scientific approach to truth. And it might not necessarily work on all avenues. Because as I say, what is true is useful, but not everything that is useful is truth. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us beyond, because three of those factors and that we've just looked at, beside congruence, are more internal processing. So let us take us into an internal space where we can see how truth is more an internal thing rather than something external. It's nothing that I can order from Amazon or that I can go to a hardware store or a grocery shop or a pharmacy and purchase. It's more a quality, a state of truth, of feeling and being that brings us to a state where we feel comfortable, confident, worthy. So right now we're going to take this time to do a meditation commentary on being internal and understanding how we can decipher truth in that way. Okay. So we have a nice screen on if you focus your attention on the screen, it will be nice because it will help you to get into that space. Before I can really decipher truth, I need to have an understanding of who I am. I need to understand myself. And to have a clear vision of who I am. Right now, let me center myself in silence and become very still. In the stillness, there is peace. A peace that is not inspired by anything external, but instead, this is a peace that emerges from the heart of my being. It needs no trigger. It needs no prop. It just exists naturally in me. In this moment of peace, I realize that this is my true nature. Once I turn my attention into silence, the first thing I experience is peace. So peace is a natural quality of who I really am. I am a peaceful being. As I stay transfixed in this peaceful state, knowing this is my true state of being, I realize that there is more to me than my physical existence. I am a spiritual being experiencing life through a physical medium, the body. I allow myself to dwell on this pure, peaceful knowledge that I am spiritual, I am a soul, I am a being of peace. Just let that register with yourself in this moment. I am spiritual, I am a soul, I am a being of peace. Allow this simple truth to infuse the mind and heart until it becomes like a pure light of wisdom, or wisdom that shines like a bright beam of light, exposing to my view all the treasures that lie deep within myself. Like a child playing in a sandbox, I revel in these treasures. They are the beautiful qualities of I, the soul. Each treasure brings greater delight than the other. And I am full of these treasures. I am full of the treasures of my innate qualities, the radiance of which creates a powerful impact on my confidence and my self-worth. Recognize this change in you right now, how confident I am to know that within me there is these treasures, beautiful treasures, that I don't need to delve outside of myself to get. In this moment, I realize how powerful I am as a soul. I do not have the limits of doubts and fears and worries as I do in the awareness of my physical identity. I have let go of all these external things, and I am now free to enjoy my inner world, my inner space of bliss, wisdom, and power. It is in this blissful state that true wisdom is experienced and realized. I am able to use my inner powers to understand and decipher what is true. And one power more than the others resonates in this way It shines a light of clarity, allowing me to see clearly what is right and what is wrong, what is false and what is true. This is the power to discern. It is my radar for deciphering truth. It is now time for me to bring my attention back to this present moment. But as I return, I bring with me the knowledge and understanding of who I am, of my natural nature, which is peace, of all the wonderful qualities that lie deep within me, and of course the power to discern clearly everything that life brings to me. Again, breathing in and out gently, become present. Thank you. You know, if we take time every day, and taking time doesn't mean hours on end, it could be a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes maximum, just to go into our inner space, that space of peace and stillness, and recognize within us the qualities and the powers that we have forgotten that they're there, but we are searching for them externally. Clarity takes place in the reflective state of introspection. And introspection itself is a power, a great power that we hold inside ourselves. If we take the time to stand back from every situation, it is really giving ourselves to introspect, to go into that space. And just as when I talk about consistency and even coherence, to stand back and ask myself, what do I know about this already? And how does this fit in with all that I already know? If it is not a fit, then it can't be true. So the power to discern gives me that power to introspect, to go within and to emerge this power. And we see ourselves and we see the world the way we want to see it. Sometimes we look at it just superficially and we don't want to see any deeper. There are times when people said to me, but I don't like silence. And why do you not like silence? Because it opens so up the doors of my thoughts, the way I'm thinking, and I don't want to engage with that. So what I do is I engage with other people's stories rather than my own. So I want to take myself superficially. Sometimes we take the world superficially. We don't really delve into anything. But the power to equip, to discern, equip us with the best tool to make accurate decisions for ourselves. And not just for ourselves, but to also to those with whom we interact. We have allowed our physical senses to rule us. We even become fearful of them. So that's why we don't want to think too much. Or do we want to wear blinkers and not see everything or just see what is in front of me. And those with whom we interact are following us as well. So we become trendsetters. And we love to set trends because it makes us feel like if we are ruling, we are in the class of very good rulers. When we allow our physical senses to rule us, that creates that kind of murkiness in the mind that does not allow us to see and decipher what is right and what is wrong, what is false or what is true, what really benefits me and what will hinder me. There are too many clouds that block us from realizing the benefit in anything that comes before us. The physical eyes see what it wants to see, and the physical ears hear only what it wants, what it is listening for. But when we discover the identity of the soul, when we discover who we really are, what we're doing is we are becoming clearer in our visions. So we are opening our spiritual eyes. And just as the heart can feel and think and understand and reason, in the same way, the spiritual eyes are not like the physical eyes. They are eyes that have the power to reason and to understand. And so when our spiritual eyes are open, we are able to see clearly everything for what they are. We are able to see beyond what is seen and heard. We are able to, from a distance, know that this thing that is before me is not true, or whatever is before me is something that is going to be of benefit for me. And that comes with that power to discern, because it is a power of clear vision where I am clearly seeing beyond what is there. And you know, sometimes we see things that others don't even know we are seeing because they think they're fooling us, they're pulling the wool over our eyes. And what is clear is that we are realizing that, no, you're trying to deceive me. But we don't have to let them know that they're doing that. Sometimes we feel that we have to tell them that I know you're trying to deceive me. I know you are lying to me. And that creates a little bit of conflict. Some anger flares up and there's some kind of verbal fight or maybe a fist fight as well. And so it doesn't really help. But there's a joy of knowing inside that you know that this person is not speaking the truth or trying to deceive you, and they don't know that you know. So there's a little joy in that, a little feeling of victory, that I know that you don't know that I know. Quite interesting. And so this is a power, the power to that we really need to develop in ourselves. And we need to develop it and use it, especially in this world where there is total deception. Especially at this time now, there's been so many information and false information really about this coronavirus, this COVID-19 pandemic, and then about the vaccine. And you just have to have your wits about you and to see the lengths that people and will go to deceive you. Just recently, a couple of days ago, maybe about 3 or 4 days ago, I received an email on the Ghana Center email address from someone stating that they are from the Department of Social Welfare in the Ghana government, and that we are registered in in Ghana as an NGO. And so they were saying that we need to fill out this Google form with our details because we need to change the format. The government has changed it. And I was aware of the change because the person who normally does all these things for us has contacted the center and say that from the 15th of April, everything that we used to do as before will be changed, and now we'll have to do it in a new format. And so before the 15th, he wants to renew for us our certificate of the NGO. It was due on the 28th of April. So we did all of that. But I thought, how could the government write you with a Gmail address? So I went onto the website of the Ghana government and look at the ministry that deals with social welfare and NGOs. And I saw the email address, which will be .gov.gh. And instead, the email I got was, yes, the acronym for the ministry, at gmail.com. So it's really false. But if I don't have my wits about me, I get trapped and I give off information that will harm not just me, but the organization. And so having that power to discern actually stop you from making foolish decisions or from being trapped in other people's deception. So it is really a power that we need to develop, because today there are packages that are glamorously packaged as valuables that will bring us happiness, but they don't. They bring temporary happiness. And what they also bring is a promise of contentment in accepting these so-called valuables. And there is a habitual pattern of desire and fear that grows from it. The desire and fear that we need more because we are liable to lose what we have accumulated. So we become trapped in the rhetoric of false valuables, of false packages that are presented as elixir for happiness and for the good life. So having this power of introspection and this power to discern, to decide clearly what is really true, is a touchstone within myself. And I don't need anyone to tell me what truth is. I can feel it. I can understand it. I know it because it does something to the inside. It's like that piece of the puzzle that brings that real contentment, that real feeling of confidence, of self-worth. So I'm going to stop now, and we'll be ready to answer any questions to the best of my ability that you might have for me. Thank you very much for listening.
Grace, thanks so much. It was a joy to listen to, and I really pulled out a few points myself from what you were saying. And I love the way you started with just defining what the heart is, that it's my conscience and my intellect. And I think that set up the talk very nicely. And for the first time ever, we've had someone with a very scientific approach on Open Your Eyes to the Universe. And so I was very much appreciating, your subject position, the discourses that you were introducing us to. How can I recognize truth reliably? And in terms of the scientific approach to truth, and then, of course, the spiritual approach. And I was noting these 4 factors to every scientific theory and philosophy. Congruency, which is about sameness and equality, where everything maps onto the other and it's the same. And you gave that lovely example of your hand or your foot. It's a mirror image, and so it's congruent. And then that factor of consistency, that there's just no doubt in my mind, it's a fact. There's no margin of error. And we were looking at volumes of water in different containers and so on. And I like the way you introduced coherence, that, it's where there's no loophole. Everything's coherent, it fits together. And then that 4th factor about usefulness, that something is useful when it's true, and it gives me a sense of mastery. And I particularly like that part that you brought in about if I'm working with something that's true, then my action will bring that successful result. And I know that very personally, both practically but also spiritually. And of course, I just thought it was lovely the way you referenced the knowledge and honoured the knowledge of street children, and how that's the usefulness factor, and then of course book knowledge as well. And then so those three factors, that usefulness is only comes in when these other three factors are in place: congruency, consistency, and coherence. A lovely way of looking and I guess priming us for the spiritual approach to truth, where we're moving out of the field of observation and moving into the inner world field of observation, that it's an internal thing, not something that you can order online or buy from a grocery shop, but it's about a state of being. And I could really feel that in the meditation commentary that you gave too, that just taking us into that inner space and encourages us to take time to go into that inner space, to bring forth those powers that actually lie within each of us. Gorgeous connection there between the clarity that takes place in that reflective space of introspection, and how silence actually opens the door to that inner clarity and introspection. Yet there's sometimes just that personal resistance to going there. We prefer to engage with other people's stories rather than take time to really look reflectively at our own story and go even deeper to the power to discern. So some very lovely things coming through there. And this thing about the power of clear vision. I like the little tip that you gave us, that we don't need to let people know that we know they're deceiving us. That can just be a quiet matter, and it's a nice way to avoid or to not get into a situation of conflict. But it doesn't mean that you don't take some action. But very lovely. And this one here, the power of introspection is a touchstone within myself, and I don't need anyone to tell me what truth is, because I know it and I feel it. So those were some of the kind of gems that I was picking up when I was listening to what you were speaking. And I'm sure other people would have picked up different things, but those were some of the highlights for me, some of what I took out as being your key messaging. We do have a few questions, and one of them is coming through is, when someone is being manipulative, have they stepped away from who they really are? And how do you deal with manipulative behavior? It feels so slippery, and equally, it seems to lack in honesty and respect.
That's a good question, in that you're talking about someone else rather than yourself. And if someone is being manipulative and you know that they're being manipulative, it is up to you to maintain your state of self. Because yes, they probably are in that state where they don't really know themselves. And the manipulation might be the end result of something deeper. It might be a lack of self-respect. It might be they feel that in manipulation, they get observation. Someone sees them. They are recognized. They are loved. You don't know what it is they're needing. But to keep your sense of self, to stay in that stage where I know who I am, and I know this other person as well. It's just that they're playing a role at this moment. And to honor that role by respect and by still giving love, they will start recognizing for themselves. You become a mirror. So they will recognize for themselves that I don't need to do all of this to get the respect and the love. Because it's hard work trying to manipulate. Manipulate is not easy. You have to think forward, and you have to create a little strategy in yourself. And I remember when my children were very small, my daughter, once I overheard her talking to her brother, who is a few older than her, but she was telling him how to get things from me. She was saying to him that, you know how everybody say I have lovely eyes? So all you have to do is to open your eyes and say, please, mom, and you will get what you need. And so it's a little strategy. She's going to manipulate me to getting into whatever she needs. And so manipulation is not an easy thing, but if we keep pointing out to people and saying, oh, you are so manipulative, they never learn how to not be manipulative, because it's like we're compounding their feeling of unworthiness. So the best thing for that is to stay in your self-respect and give that feeling of love and good wishes to that person, that they can move out of that habit of manipulating. Don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that. This isn't a question, but I'm just listening to your response. And you opened it with saying that this was what someone else was reporting. You know, someone was saying someone else is being manipulative. What about when you're being manipulative? When you know you yourself are being manipulative, how do you change that?
Yeah. When I'm being manipulated, what I'm doing, I'm draining my energy. And so if I could just look at myself and say, how do I feel when after I do this? Because the feeling is not a great feeling. At no time when you try to manipulate anything do you feel, hooray, great, I feel so wonderful. In fact, there's a little feeling of guilt or sometimes a little shame that needles inside of you. And if you ask yourself, is this how I want to feel every time? If the answer is no, then I get the strength, I start gathering the strength to stop that pattern of behavior, to change it. And each time I feel the urge to manipulate, I remind myself how I will feel after that whole manipulation process. And so I stop myself from being manipulative. And to do that, I really have to have a relationship with myself. And once I have that relationship with myself, there is not really that urge to manipulate anyone or anything or any situation.
And developing that relationship with myself, what would you suggest as being the key steps in really developing that very introspective relationship with yourself? It kind of anchored a lot of what you're saying about becoming introspective and increasing your power to discern. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you went about developing that relationship with yourself, where you moved out of those sorts of maybe shades of denial or misunderstandings about yourself and moved into a more truthful understanding of yourself?
Good. The question I ask myself is, how do I develop any relationship with anyone? I first introduce myself to them and I try to get to know what they like and how they would love to be treated. And it's the same with the self. I need to introduce me to me because I have forgotten who I am. So I need now to stay still and ask myself, okay, Grace, are you this name, Grace? What happens if you change your name? Would you change as a person? So this self-dialogue is really one step in really getting to know yourself and getting to strike up a relationship with yourself, as you do with anybody. When you meet someone for the first time, you strike a conversation and you get, from that conversation, you get to hear the things that make them tick, the things that they like, the things that they aspire to be. And it's the same with yourself. It's not different. It's the only thing is there is no other person in the room. It's just you and you alone. So you could do it standing in front of the mirror. I remember when I first got into lecturing, one of the lecturers said to me, because this is not just lecturing to a class of 30 students, this is a hall with 200 plus students. And so he said to me, you know what I used to do is I practice in front of the mirror, and everyone that I see is a representative of me. So I'm talking to me and I'm not scared of talking to me. And so forming a relation with myself, forming a relationship with myself is one way in which I get to know me fully. So no one could tell me anything that will make me feel a little bit shaken that this is what I am. And they say, maybe they tell me something that I already know. It's a fault I have, yes, but I know it because I have that relationship with myself. And I form that relationship by having dialogues with myself. Even when I'm eating, so why do I enjoy this? Maybe I like spicy food better than food that are more bland. And so it's that wonderful little dialogue with the self, playing games with the self. Children are good at it.
Mm, mm, mm.
Having imaginary friends. Yeah.
Mm. Can you talk a little bit about you've spoken about soul. So when we were looking at the spiritual truth, you referred to yourself as a soul, and that this was a place of natural truth. How does that sit alongside? Tell us about the soul, and how does that sit alongside the scientific understandings of truth?
I have to say, the scientific understanding of truth, it doesn't really.
Yeah.
Not yet. They're working on it. They're still trying to get that theory of everything sorted, but coming close. But when we talk about soul, we're talking about an energy, a power within, which scientifically they do believe, but they just wouldn't call it soul. At least recently, not so very recently, a couple of years ago, really, that there's been all this talk about the God spot. And the God spot is not really God as we know it to be. It just means grand organizing design. And so this God spot is that space in our thought process where we are enlightened in some way. And there have been research that carried out on monks and nuns, and they discover that it's here. It's in that pineal gland where we actually have some activity happening, even though we are not thinking about anything in particular. And so that's the God spot. But as far as soul is concerned, they are not too much into that entity. They're still looking at particles. But the soul is that tiny particle that is inseparable, that we cannot um, we cannot break down into anything smaller. It's the smallest particle. And there is a search in the scientific world for that smallest particle. They call it the Higgs boson, but it still haven't been found fully. They've been finding different things in the Grand Hadron Collider in CERN in Switzerland. And so science and spirituality is coming closer, but it's not close enough for them to understand the workings of the soul and what the soul is. But in spirituality, when we go into that space of silence, naturally, we begin to recognize that there is an energy within me that knows, that feels, that understands. And I don't need science to tell me that. It's there. It's that feeling that I get as an experience that's very difficult to explain, really.
It's so. What is the soul then? If you mentioned intellect and conscience before, which are things that are so critical to truth finding and truth sourcing and knowing truth. What's that connection with the soul? How do they intersect?
Yeah. The soul is truth. It is the only thing that remains exactly the same. The body doesn't remain the same. So the body starts as a little fetus, and then it grows into, when it is out of the womb, it's a little human that grows and grows and grows and become a mature human into old age if it lives up to old age. But the soul is truth. It is who I truly am. And that's unchangeable. Truth cannot change. If it's changing, then it's not truth. Truth is the only thing that remains absolutely the same. It is that congruence that maps exactly onto it. It is no difference whatsoever. And so the soul is that tiny energy point that probably when we look at the screen during the meditation, that little in the orange background, that tiny point, it is like the soul. I'm not saying that is the soul, but the soul is that tiny point of living energy, energy that is different from the energy around, that the energy that fuels your cooking or your heating system in your house. It is energy that is knowledgeable, that is wise, and that has the power to guide you through a life of happiness, of bliss. So it is the truth. The truth is the soul. And when we start understanding it, then we realize that all these different powers that exist in the truth, in the soul, they are truth. Because what will come from truth is truth. Truth will not exude falseness. So all the powers, all the qualities that I have within myself that are innate to me, they are truth. And those that I have accumulated do not make me feel comfortable. So they're not part of the soul. They are not part of truth. I don't know if that makes sense, but the soul is truth and it cannot be seen, but it can be experienced. And so that's why we go into silence, so we can experience truth. And this is why I said, let us not ask the question of what truth is, but instead, let me ask the question of how can I recognize truth reliably when it appears? And I can only recognize it reliably when it resonates in the soul as a quality or as a power of truth.
It's lovely. Thank you for that. Here's another question that's come in, Grace. It's, what should or could I do if I really think that someone in a position of authority over me is really not telling the truth intentionally and it's having an impact on me?
I think in that case, this is where we need to draw a line and say to that person, I know it's someone in authority, but there are polite ways of speaking, to say to them, look, I don't feel comfortable. You give your feeling. You don't challenge them with what they're doing, but say, I don't feel comfortable when you ask me to do X, Y, or Z, or when you tell me this. It doesn't really fit nicely with me. I don't feel that comfortable. What would you like me to do instead? And so you put it into their side of the court so they can actually change the way they act, or maybe they can actually say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. In that case, keep your feelings under your control. Don't give your control of your feelings to someone else, whether they're your boss or your subordinate. You are in charge of your feeling. No one can make you feel bad. It is the thoughts that you create in your mind that makes you feel bad. So they are being untruthful, but you are taking what they're doing and creating sadness for yourself or a feeling that is hurting you. So again, you draw that line that I'm not going to allow this to affect me, and be determined about it. And once it's not affecting you anyway, it tends to stop, because people do things to get some kind of reaction. And if they're not getting the reaction, then they suddenly will calm down. Try it, it might work.
Thanks, Grace. Here's another one that's come through. How do I know when I'm not telling the complete truth? Like, is it okay to tell white lies just to save myself or someone else?
You know, that's a really interesting question because it's a question that we all ask. And for myself too, I think that, you know, is there a time when I can tell a white lie and get away with it? But, you know, there is this saying that what is in the darkness will always come to the light. And if we keep that in our mind, even when telling a white lie, we know that one day it will become a true lie. And so, do I want that on my slate? But on the other hand, if it is going to save a life, what do I do? And I think in that case, we need to weigh up what is more important, saving the life of someone or telling the truth. It is a dilemma that we find ourselves in. And I think we will err on the caution of saving. So if it is something that like you harboring someone who is being, let's say, in a scenario where there is violence in the home and this person has come to you for refuge, and let's say it's with the husband, and the husband comes to your door asking, is my wife here? Would you say, yes, she's here? Or would you say, well, I haven't seen her? It depends, because you know that she's in danger, her life is in danger. So what do you do in cases? Again, using that power to discern will tell you exactly how you have to act. And acting on the truth of knowing that this person's life is in danger, then by me saying something is preventing further danger to the life. So it's not so much an untruth, but it's a self-defense. And again, the power to discern helps me to know how to act in that situation.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great answer. Here's another one that's come through. The thing about denial is that the person just can't see it. How do you interact with someone in denial, or are you better off leaving the situation?
I think you're better off leaving the situation because denial is a very, very deep-seated negativity. In fact, it's underlying denial are things like guilt and shame and apathy and also regrets. And so all these things that person needs to work out for themselves before they could actually move into a space where they can understand anything that you are saying. They need to have special counseling. When someone is in denial, it means they are not ready to face, because either there is some sort of guilty feelings or some regrets or some bit of shame. These are qualities that you don't see. These are things that people harbor within themselves. And I like to call them rags, and they are rags that we put in our hearts. And unless we burn those rags, and how do we burn those rags? We burn those rags with the power of love, self-love. The more love I pour into myself, is the more I will finish these regrets and this apathy and guilt and shame. And when I get rid of them, I move out of denial. I'm ready now to listen. And so I will say, move away, give some space, allow the person the space to work out things themselves. And then you can actually step in.
That's great. Thank you. Another one coming through here is there such a thing as universal truth, or is it dependent on our subject position? That is, who we are and who we know.
Universal truth is what the scientists are looking for. There is universal truth because each one of us in our identity as soul is truth. So there is universal truth because every human being on this planet is a soul. And the soul is that life force of the body. And when I'm conscious of that soul, I'm in my truth. Universally, that will work. I see you because I see myself as I am. There is also that inner truth, that inner feeling that I know myself deeply, and so I know what is true for me. But universally, what is true for me is also true for everybody else. What are the things that we are searching for in life? We all want peace, and we all want to be loved and to love, and we all want happiness, and we all want to know things. So we want wisdom, and we want that cleanliness of heart. We want that purity. We are all looking for that, maybe in different ways, but that means that we universally, we are truth finders because we are truth in itself. And we're trying to find that truth that we once knew, but we have forgotten where it is and how we to find it.
Very nice.
So universally, yes, there is.
Sorry, what was that?
I say
So
universally, yes, there is truth.
yeah. Sorry, I cut you off there. Here's a time for another question here. What should I do if I know someone is lying to me? And for that matter, what should I do if I know a leader is lying? I guess this is a pretty common experience that people are having, isn't it? Like, and hence, because these questions have come up a couple of times here, but also interestingly, it's another question about authority. What do I do if I know a leader is lying?
There's very little we can do with authority, but there is what we can do with individuals. If an individual is lying to you and you know that they're lying, you can always diffuse that by saying, you can always tell me what is true. I will never judge you. You give them that assurance because they're only lying because they want to save face or something more, that they don't want you to think badly about them. But if you give them the assurance that you are receptive to whatever they have to say, then they will be less likely to lie to you. In terms of leaders and politics, there's nothing we can do right now. This is the world in which we live. It's a world where there's a battle now between truth and falsehood. And falsehood seemed to be winning. It seemed to be on top. But the more of us that come to the realization of our own truth, of our soul, of the way we are as a being, then that will grow and the atmosphere will be filled with more truth than falsehood. But at the moment now, leadership, wherever in the world you are, leadership is based on lies and more lies. There are very, very few leaders in the world that you can say are completely honest. So there's nothing we could do much about the leadership, more than have good wishes for them. Do not focus on the lies, but focus on the truths we know about them, that they are souls and that they are playing a role. The role that they're playing right now is a role where they're disguising truth. But the more we send them good wishes and pure feelings, they will be able to move out of that role. And it might take time. It mightn't take 1 day or 2 days or 1 month. It might take years, but eventually they will change.
Great, thanks, Grace. We've pretty much run out of time now because I know we want to finish with the meditation commentary, and you've selected one from B.B. Butler's "Release Your Wings," and it's on a CD called Pure Vision. So a great opportunity to meditate together to this commentary. Are you happy to do that?
Yes, sure.
Let's go then.
Pure vision is the ability to see the truest part of myself and others with the spiritual eyes. It is the seed of all the interactions I have with the world. How I see myself and others changes everything. It alters the way I act, the decisions I make. It begins with vision. Take a moment right now to just quiet your mind and make it as still as an evening sky. And think right now of someone you truly love or have loved. Think of how you saw them with a vision of love. And can you see how that changed your interactions with them, the way you spoke to them, the things you did for them? Now ask yourself very honestly, how do you see yourself on a daily basis? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? How do you see yourself on a daily basis? Do you see yourself as ordinary, as gender? Do you see yourself within the confines of limits? Or do you see something deeper? Pure vision means that when I see the self, I see the self beyond any history, beyond any situations that have perhaps shaped my feelings and emotions. It means I transcend the physical scenarios of my life to see something beyond the surface. Take a journey now, away from your history, away from the situations that may be whirling around you, and allow yourself to drift and float away from them to a place where there is no gravity of situations. Allow yourself to drift to a place where your mind feels quiet and light, clean of the past, absolutely still. And as you sit in this beautiful sacred spot, imagine for a moment that someone gives you the eyes to see yourself with a vision of angels, with a vision of the divine. How would you see yourself if you had the eyes of the divine? How would you see yourself if you had the ability to suddenly see the extraordinary inside of you? Allow the pure feeling of your real self to expand as you see with that pure vision, with eyes that transcend the physical world. With eyes that have the capacity to see you beyond your role, beyond your situations. enjoy this vision of yourself. And allow the feeling of that inner greatness to expand and grow and lift you and make you lighter. Now gently return back to the world, but with a new and purified vision of yourself, and ask yourself if you have that vision of yourself daily, even if only for 5 minutes a day, how would your actions and life change? How would the way you carry yourself in relationships change? How would the way you move through the world change if you had the eyes to see yourself with truth and with purity? True change can happen when we develop the power of pure vision for ourselves, for others, and for the world.
It was lovely, Grace, wasn't it? You know, that the beauty of pure vision and how that's so deeply and intimately connected with truth. Yeah, it's gorgeous. Grace, I want to say thanks so much. There's a lot of things coming in here through the chat box. Thank you, Dr. Grace, so inspiring. Messages like that. So very much a lot of quiet written applause coming in for the contribution and that you've made tonight to us here in Down Under. I think that it's been such an inspiring kind of talk, really, because we've, for the first time on Youniverse, we've got someone who's comes from a scientific background and bringing in a topic like truth. It's not an easy topic to discuss so clearly when actually the lack of truthfulness muddies the intellect so much that to even come to consider what truth might be. And I think you held that really well and we pitched quite a few diverse questions your way as well. So very, very deep thanks to you. I'm just reading some more things in the chat. Such an amazing session. Thanks, dear Grace. Loved the Q&A. So people are really appreciating, I guess, the honesty and the experience that you brought to the way that you answered those questions. So from all of us, our love, our thanks, our blessings. It's been lovely to have you with us. It's a pleasure to be able to listen to you and to reflect on your wisdom and the insights that you shared with us. So thank you so much, Grace. It'd be lovely to see your face again. If you say something, you'll flick up on our screen and you can say goodbye to us all. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your lovely comments and for the questions. And I think, you know, when I was listening to the meditation commentary just now, it was really answering one of the questions on I think it was the one on the politicians, that if I have pure vision for them, it's my vision that changes everything. So if I keep that pure vision for them, eventually they will change. And so I like that. Thank you so much for having me. And I think this is my trip down under anyway.
Well, let's see. We might get to welcome you to these shores in person, and that would be our delight as well. Thanks so much, Grace. Just closing out now, viewers, thanks for your questions. As always, we really appreciate them. It's a lovely way to interact together. And you may like to browse our online bookshop, Eternity Inc., which has a full online range of books on self-empowerment and spirituality. And they're always at not-for-profit prices. I can't be sure if B.B. Butler's meditation commentaries are available there, but do go online and have a look. You can see the depth with which she engages with the meditation. If you'd like to subscribe to Open Your Eyes to the Universe to receive our monthly updates, please email us at special.events@au.brahmakumaris.org. And that's up on the screen there, so you'll be able to see how to spell it. And finally, I'd like to tell you about our next episode of Open Your Eyes to the Universe. We're going to be exploring conflict. So we'll be touching on what is conflict, how to nip it in the bud and de-escalate it, how to resolve it, and most significantly, how we might prevent it. And I'm sure there's a lot of other goodies packed in there as well. But our two guest speakers are Chrissy Mahoney and Niall Phoenix. Now, for decades of studying the human spirit and a determination to understand why we fight and hurt each other, Chrissy Mahoney studied for her master's degree in conflict resolution and mediation. And she encourages people to find harmony, to empower themselves and develop their creative self while engaging in processes of healing and self-awareness. Neil Phoenix will be joining Chrissy, and he has always had an interest in the dynamics of human behaviour. Ultimately, his interest led him to study meditation and psychotherapy and counselling. And as a counsellor, he continued his studies for a postgraduate degree in mediation and conflict resolution. So they're joining us on our next Youniverse, which is next month, Saturday, the 24th of July, 6 p.m, with Chrissy Mahoney and Niall Phoenix sharing on conflict solutions. Don't miss it. You're going to love them. Until then, take care. And until we meet again, may your intellect remain alert, clean, divine, and filled with the power to discern. Om Shanti.